We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Do you not understand that they are that way because you're Joe Flacco?
And you just like to discredit things that people deserve credit for.
That you can't possibly be expected to defend that.
Talk about the game, Sam.
So,
who cares about what people think about us?
Yeah, I like football season, and all the things that go with
it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL Podcast. Steve Palazzolo somewhere with Sam Monson back in the studio talking all things NFL. Sam, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing okay. We got technical problems this morning, so I'm sitting here with a headset in the fancy becushioned studio, which is developing more and more. I don't know, what do you call those? Like decorations, accoutrements, nice touches.
Definitely. Yeah. So that's great. It's I'll be back with you soon. And I'll be bringing the gear.
Can't wait.
Yeah, bringing the uniform for you to wear.
Excellent.
Nice job with Seth getting into some X's and O's on the last episode.
Yeah. I mean, I was particularly proud of the ad reads because, when you disappear, it's only when you leave that I realize those things exist and that, it's not that easy, right? I just sort of switch off and let you roll and occasionally mock you for your transition into them. But it's like a pain in the ass. And it's only when I have to do it and open the document and, read these things that you're like, yeah, that's actually a thing. So
there are sponsors, Sam. You're supposed to enjoy the experience.
I did a good job of it. I mean, two of the transitions I think were smooth. One of them there was no way in. I just had to roll. And somebody emailed and was let's see, what's this guy's name? Jean-Paul Vallieu emailed in and said, great transitions, tight pacing was good, but I forgot the promo for the Bobby Wagner interview that isn't going to happen, or at least didn't happen in that show, and never happened.
If you stay tuned today, maybe Bobby Wagner is going to show up at the end of the show. You never know if Bobby Wagner is going to show up. I do know what's going to show up, though. It's our 40% off sale, which is here. Save 40. I'm back, baby. Save 40% off any PFF subscription. We get the Fantasy Football Draft Guide out there right now, the College Football Preview Magazine, and the first edition of the 2022 NFL Draft Guide. It's all there, and you get 40% off if you are a first-time subscriber using the promo code SAVE40. Most importantly, I think you can get all of the access to all of our fantasy tools for $5.99. That's it. I don't need them because I already use them to dominate my league. I don't need them anymore. I already drafted extremely well a couple years ago in the old Dynasty League, Sam, that we dominate every year. But everybody needs them. That's how I win. So save 40% off any PFF subscription.
This also feels a lot like, by the way, being on TV. There's three separate screens that I could be looking at here, and the one place I'm actually supposed to look has no screen. So it's
nice.
I'm just wanting to know the kind of technical challenges I'm dealing with here without you here.
If you're not making eye contact with me, I understand. I know it's it's a part of the game. I know we're looking at each other. So because we're wrapping up July, it's almost training camp battle season. That's something we'll be covering very soon. We'll be previewing every single team for the 2021 NFL season. That's going to be coming up soon. But today, we decided we're going to play the what if game. I think people have heard us say a lot of the same stuff over the last few months, and it's tough to try to break it up. Sometimes your takes don't change between January and September. But right now, we'll play the what if game for the 2021 NFL season. Maybe, what if some things that we don't necessarily expect to happen, what if they do happen? How will that change the course of the NFL. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
It sounds good because we agreed upon it before the show.
Yeah.
So we will.
It sounds good because that's the plan for the podcast today. It would sound worse if it wasn't.
Let's play the what if game. So you come up. We'll go back and forth. You come up with a scenario that might be a little bit unlikely, and we'll talk through it.
All right. So just before we get to the ones that we're actually going to talk about, I have two more, I think, that I want to throw in there. One, because there's a video that just keeps popping up on my feed today, which is another absurd Jameis Winston workout video where he's running around throwing a towel with a dog chasing him. Like, what if Jameis Winston didn't have all of these ridiculous workout videos? Like, how much do you think your opinion and your take on Jameis Winston is being skewed by the ridiculous videos that keep getting posted about the way he prepares to be a quarterback? Because every single one of them has made me think less of it.
So this is making it worse for you?
Yes. Every single workout video of Jameis Winston somehow preparing to be a quarterback makes me think less about his capacity to be an NFL quarterback. Every single one of them.
So it's having the opposite effect on you. But look, I haven't seen any of. I saw one of them. I'm trying to clear the brain of that nonsense so you don't get swayed either positively or negatively. So I have a neutral response to Jameis Winston workout videos. He's going to be the same. He's volatile even in workouts, right? He's making you go the other way. He's probably encouraging other people, saying, "Oh, look at this dude throwing lasers." I saw Pat McAfee actually talk about him throwing lasers. Said he's ready to go. The LASIK is ready.
And then, my other what if is, what if Tom Brady was human, and a torn MCL would actually put him out for a season? Unlike, everything we've talked about Tom Brady last year. Most insane first year in a Bruce Arians system ever. Takes a ragtag team to the Super Bowl that was 9-7 the year before. Wins the Super Bowl in his first time of asking somewhere else. Did all of it on a torn MCL. Like completely torn. Not just like A, partially torn, or B, as it was first reported, tore it sometime before the Super Bowl. No, the whole year he was playing on a torn MCL and looked as good as ever at 43 years old. What the hell are we dealing with at this point?
That's crazy, actually. Nobody really noticed, the entire year.
Right. Well, he wasn't on the injury report.
So it obviously was manageable enough that it wasn't really noticeable. It's not like he was limping the whole season or anything like that. So I think it does speak to his recovery method and all that stuff. I think the other thing is, though...
You're saying this is an endorsement for TB12?
It's his endorsement. I think so. I think it is. It's like next year it'll be, I played on a torn ACL. Yeah, which is
made that
almost
point.
Impossible.
I can't remember who tweeted this, but somebody made the point that... Do you remember back in 2008 when, was it Pollard took his knee out in week 1 or whatever it was, and that's Brady done for the year, right? And that was the Matt Castle season and blah, blah, blah. Somebody made the point that Brady wanted to play on that year and was claiming that he practiced that week and was claiming that hey, I can get through this with no ACL, right? I can keep going. And the Patriots basically went, "No, dude, sit down, you're done. For your own safety, we are shutting you down." But that's not entirely without precedent, right? Phillip Rivers played was in an AFC Championship game on a torn ACL. It's been done, and Brady was prepared to do it for the entire season in 2008. That was an ACL, but here we go, a torn MCL last year, and it didn't affect him to the point where A, you didn't know, and B, they never had to put it on the injury report because you only have to put stuff on the injury report if A, it keeps you out of practice, or B, it has there's some kind of term like a material negative effect or a likely negative effect on a guy's play. And they determined that clearly it didn't. Yeah,
and they were right. Brady was our second highest graded quarterback. They go to the Super Bowl and win it and the whole deal. It still will not keep people from the first overthrow this year. The keyboards are going to be hot, Sam, with he's lost it. He's too old. The first time he overthrows or underthrows a receiver, right? Those articles are still going to come out.
This is what's freaky is that, the thing that I've been saying for a while now is that the thing that's going to get Brady is the Favre thing, where eventually, because you're 40-something years old, stuff just starts to break on your body that didn't when you were in your 20s, and eventually those just put you down, right? This was the thing that's supposed to put Brady down, and he kept on trucking and was like an MVP for the season. Like, nothing's going to put him out. If you tear his MCL and he just gets up like the Terminator and goes out there and puts up like a league-leading big-time throw rate and wins the Super Bowl, like, what the hell are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
This is Arnie putting 12-gauge shotgun rounds through the guy's head, and it just like, reseals around the bullet hole and wins another Super Bowl. Brady is the T-1000 is what I'm saying here. T-1000? Was that the liquid metal guy from the Terminator? That's Brady.
That's what he is. That's what we're realizing. It's unbelievable. So we'll see if he can stay healthy once again. You got to go upstairs, buddy. Okay, grab your stuff. Go upstairs.
Oh, this is full on. This is full.
The kids broke in.
COVID lockdown video. We got the kids breaking in.
Kids broke into the parents' basement. So let's get into this what if game. I'll let you. Ones. Yeah, the real ones. I'll let you go first. Give me a what if that we don't think is going to happen, and we'll talk through, the ramifications.
What if Jordan Love is actually good? Because this Aaron Rodgers thing, I still maintain that I don't think Rodgers is going back to the Packers. I think it's too hard to piece together, given the problems, given his situation, et cetera, et cetera. So that probably leaves us with this Jordan Love-led Green Bay Packers that nobody thinks are going to have any shot of doing anything, that they're going to be, way behind the chasing pack, so to speak. They're going to be out of division title. They're going to be out of Super Bowl contention because Jordan Love is now the quarterback. But what if Jordan Love's good? Like this.
How surprised? Where would your surprised meter be?
I would be surprised, but Jordan Love is of the same ilk of that run of toolsy quarterbacks that have worked out pretty well over recent years. Now,
that's what I was going to say. On paper, it shouldn't work.
Right.
But on paper, Josh Allen and maybe Herbert, some other guys maybe shouldn't have either.
Right. And I think, look, the jury is still out on whether that is a causative thing or if this is just the way the league has run over the last few years, right? Like, you can tie Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Daniel Jones to an extent, Deshaun Watson. You can tie a bunch of these guys together with a very broad stroke brush and say these are all toolsy quarterbacks that happen to have, kind of worked out to some degree or massively worked out at other degrees. And you can say, well, that means that toolsy quarterbacks are inherently a better bet right now than maybe they used to be. Or you can just say, look, these are 5-6 different players who all have varying different skill sets, of which one happens to be physical tools to play the position. It's not like it's going after toolsy quarterbacks is not the thing that's going to get you success. But if you're of the opinion that, hey, look, all these guys with tools have worked out quite well relative to where we thought they could be, Jordan Love ticks that box, right? He's big, he's pretty athletic, he's got a hell of an arm, and he's got some of the Josh Allen stuff about him in terms of lower level of competition, was better the year before his final year in college when he had a bit better of a supporting cast. Like, the parallels between Josh Allen and Jordan Love are quite strong, I would say.
Yeah, the one thing that gives me pause about Jordan Love is I think last season, last season not hearing any buzz about him, not having him active for the Packers. To me, if we didn't have that, I don't think I'd be all that surprised. And I think surprised if he was successful. Now I'm a little bit more hesitant. Like when Mahomes was out for the season, you heard some of those rumblings. Hey, this dude on the scout team is going to be good, and maybe it's time for him to take over for Alex Smith, even though Alex Smith is having a great season.
Don't you think that's kind of different though? Because like the difference in stature between the starter, right? Aaron Rodgers versus Alex Smith. The second Mahomes was drafted, it was like, oh, Alex Smith is on borrowed time. It's just the clock is ticking essentially this year to when he's going to take a seat and Mahomes is going to take over.
Yeah.
Even when the Packers drafted Jordan Love, it was like, oh, so at some point Aaron Rodgers is disappearing, but like nobody expected it to happen during the season. Right?
Yeah. I mean,
and certainly not when Rodgers started to play like an MVP level. At that point, it's just like, well, Jordan Love is sometime down the line. And because, like, maybe the fact that he wasn't the number 2 is the thing that would say, all right, that's a red flag. On the other hand, if they determined early that, hey, he's the quarterback of the future, he'll be the number 3, and then we'll sort of develop him from the sideline year 1, like he's never even going to get the reps to prove different. You know what I mean? He's just not going to get given the opportunity to win a different spot on the depth chart. He is just the number 3 for the year. And at which point I don't think it means anything necessarily that we didn't hear a whole lot about him year 1.
Yeah, I mean, so then from an on-field standpoint, the thing that I would be excited about for if the Packers have to play him, he does have that really good arm. He does have really good touch as well. And I think part of the stuff that got Love into trouble in college was partly his aggressiveness. He didn't see a whole lot of throws that he didn't like. And of course that goes both ways, be with Jameis and, enjoying that part of Jameis's game because you get some of that volatility, you get some of that high end play. But how much of that was Jordan Love in his last season at Utah State, new system, a little bit lesser supporting cast. So he does have a lot of those, hey, I'm just trying to chuck it through a linebacker a little bit too often, but that also leads to some of those spectacular throws as well, some of those out of the pocket plays. So it's not, look, I don't think the odds are strong that Jordan Love is instantly, the next, forget even just calling him Hall of Famer, but the next great starting quarterback for the Packers. It's just general odds are going to be low for that, going from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love's here for the next 15 years. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's good. I still think, there's a lot more to see though from him, obviously.
Oh, of course. I mean, there are some things to like that, not the last year, the second last year, which I will, for our purposes, that's the one to focus on, right? Because last season, a bunch of change in college. I don't think that was a fair reflection of who he can be. And certainly for the purposes of what if he's good, you almost have to throw that season out completely. So his best season in college, his PFF grade when kept clean, which as we know is the most stable, predictive part of quarterback play, was 90.4 with a big time throw rate of 5%. That year he was also phenomenal on the deep ball, which is, what you want and need to see for a guy to be really good at the NFL level is that threat of a deep pass. And then the other thing, as much as it might be concerning that Green Bay stuffed him as the number 3 quarterback on the depth chart and basically didn't mention his name during his rookie season, the fact that they did what they did to acquire him in the first place means that they loved him at the time. Not just because they traded up and drafted him in the first round, but because they did that at a time when it made no sense in terms of the timeline to move on from Aaron Rodgers. They were at least a year too early to make that move in order for any kind of smooth transition away from Rodgers, which is why this whole situation exists in the first place, right? Because Rodgers' contract was such that this made no sense to happen this offseason. So the Packers essentially said, all right, Rodgers looks like he might be declining. We need to start thinking about his succession plan. And then they love Jordan Love so much that they bumped everything up a year and traded up in the draft to make that happen. I was
going to say, I'm softening in my old age because the more, the analytics folks and what they do for us, it's not as simple. When you're projecting stuff going forward, it's not always as simple as just taking the PFF grades and projecting it forward and saying that's it. They do take, that is what you just described as a data point. How much other people love a player is a data point that does have value, whether I like it or not. Traditionally, I don't like it. Don't overdraft this player that I don't like, right? But it's a data point, right? It is something that says enough people believe this guy was a first rounder. I thought he was a second rounder, or a third rounder, but enough people thought he was a first rounder, which should elevate his status in your mind just a little bit. Technically, from a data standpoint, it should, even though traditionally we say, well, Alex Leatherwood, we said he was a second rounder. You drafted him in the first. That's a reach. That's a miss. So I guess it's more posing the question: how much do you put? How much? I thought Tim Tebow was a first round quarterback because the Denver Broncos picked him in the first round. But even at the time, 11 years ago, I was thinking, man, he's not a first round quarterback. That's just one team that believes it. How much do you put into that data point, so to speak, that somebody believed he was a first rounder? And to your point, at this time when I don't have to draft him, I have to get Jordan Love. I got to have that guy. Like, that's a pretty strong vote of confidence in his ability.
It is. It's a massively strong. So what it does, it is a huge endorsement from Green Bay in their level of confidence and their love in that guy, right? So the very minimum, we know that the Packers love this dude, pun intended, when they drafted him. Now, should that have any bearing on what you think? Maybe not. But I think what it should do definitely is ask that question, which is, are you 100% sure? Because these guys over here think something way different to what you do. So I would treat that, like a weird number at the combine, or, one of these strange data points that pops up and looks like an anomaly compared with everything else you see on a player. And just it raises itself as like a check. It's like, are you, a guy runs a 4.2 and you thought he was a 4.4, 4.5 guy. Now, does that mean you toss out all your analysis and everything changes and he's a different player in your eyes? No, but you should probably go and check, right? Like, if a guy pops up 0.3 of a second faster than you thought he was, that should send you back to the tape, back to your analysis, and ask, are you 100% certain on everything you decided about this dude? So with Jordan Love, the fact that the Packers did that, I think, should make you go and recheck where you are on this guy. So when we're, projecting this idea of what if he's good, that's a relevant thing. And, you can create a case between the Packers' endorsement of him, between that penultimate season, between the big-time throws, between the physical tools. Like, you put all this together and you can make an argument that Jordan Love is not like the punchline of a joke, which is the way he's being portrayed right now. There is actually a chance that a year on the sideline and this dude steps in and actually looks pretty good.
Before we get into my big what if, got to give a shout out to our friends over at Fantrax. Fantrax's NFL Fantasy Football League Manager is the most customizable, easy to use, and feature-rich platform in the entire industry. And PFF is gearing up to play our leagues on Fantrax this season. They have multi-team trades, which I know you love, Sam. Player salary and contract options, bonus points for touchdowns for different yardage, projected player rankings based on your league's custom scoring, and you can auto-generate player salaries for your league. Whichever league you're in, you can customize it exactly the way you want. If you're coming from another site, that's no problem either. Fantrax can import any of your current leagues. Sign up and play now at fantrax.com/PFF and actually get a chance to win an autographed jersey from our favorite player, Sam, Josh Allen. That's right. You could sign up and get an autographed jersey from our favorite player. It's Josh Allen. The Bills' Josh Allen, I assume. They didn't specify, but I'm assuming it's not the Jaguars' Josh Allen. This is fantrax.com/PFF, home of fantasy sports. I got to get that jersey. That's what I want to wear for our
that would be perfect.
Our next game.
Be already here.
So yeah, I use Fantrax in the old Dynasty League, as you would call it. It's a dynasty for the rest of us here. So let me give my big what if though. That was a good explanation of Jordan Love, and did we just talk ourselves into he's top 15 quarterback this year?
No,
Aaron's
I don't think it'll
Jeopardy.
happen. I just think you can make that case.
All right, here's my first big what if. What if the Patriots just aren't good this year? What if the New England Patriots, after all the moves that they made, what if they're not good? And by that I say a 500 or worse season. What if that happens? Does that does that bring up the Brady Belichick stuff again?
Yes.
Does that make you think, hey, Belichick, the greatest coach of all time, is just not going to be around much longer? For all the investment that they made, and here's the point I kept making all offseason. The investment they made should benefit them here in 2021. All of the additions, they should be a better team this year. But what if they're not? And then they're sitting here with all these guys on the cap in 2022. It's still a Cam Newton, Mac Jones. We don't know who the starting quarterback is. If they're not good this year, what happens?
Can I answer your question with a question?
Yes.
What would need to happen for Bill Belichick, for the credit in the bank that Bill Belichick has built up over the last 20 years to disappear to the point where you start thinking about, well, we need a new head coach?
You would
not necessarily this year, but generally, right? We're already starting to go with this Brady Belichick thing. Brady's winning. So if the whole thing falls apart this year and the Patriots go 4-13, I'm running at it 4-13. what happens, right? Like how much credit in the bank does he have?
Okay, so it would take a lot of that stuff. It would take Brady comes into New England. I think it's week 4, right? Brady comes into New England and drops like 40 on them, right? It embarrasses the Patriots. It would take, Mac Jones to maybe play some football and look overwhelmed, or Cam Newton when he plays looks about the same as last year or worse, whatever it is, right? And if they won 4 games, yeah, those conversations are absolutely starting. In addition to, because look, as much as I don't think that the Brady-Belichick thing, we're not going to determine what happened the previous 20 years by what happens in 2020, in 2021. But if Brady does go on another run, and even if they just go to the NFC Championship or go to another Super Bowl or whatever it is, it's like 2 years of evidence with Brady without Belichick on both ends of the spectrum. And if they just keep pushing away from each other, Brady's teams keep getting better and Belichick's teams keep getting worse, that conversation will absolutely start. Now, I don't believe this is going to happen. I do believe the Patriots are just solid across the board and they'll be better this year. And if Cam Newton is the starter, I think he'll play better in year 2 in that system. Or if Mac Jones plays, I think he'll be able to, spread the ball around and be a solid starter. I think they'll get much better quarterback play than they did last year. I think they'll be okay. But if they're not, this organization is in huge trouble because they haven't drafted well. They just spent $500 million in free agency. And if that doesn't work, they're starting from scratch once again.
It would be fascinating to me just like how fast that level of credit in the bank can be eroded, There's been 2 or 3 head coaches in NFL history, which is a century now, that have had the kind of job security and, resume that Bill Belichick has had. And to sort of like just how quickly that can all disappear. And you go, yeah, I mean, you've done great things for us and you created this dynasty. On the other hand, I'm going to have to kick you out of the building because you haven't won in the last year and a half.
Let me ask you this. I'm going to make a wrestling analogy, Sam. See if you can follow here. The most important decision Bill Belichick has ever made was starting Tom Brady at quarterback, right? It's the most important decision in NFL history. And he deserves credit for that decision, right? That is the thing. If he kept Drew Bledsoe as the quarterback, do you think they have the same success?
No.
For the next few years. I don't think they do. So he deserves credit for that. But is it too short-sighted to only give him credit for that one decision and say that led to all the success? Of course, Belichick's a good defensive coach and he gets the most out of his players and they've done a good job with the middle-class players and stuff. But that doesn't mean as much if you don't have Tom Brady at quarterback. And the wrestling analogy I'll make is the old NWO, right? WCW. Eric Bischoff is still the only known. He was the guy who ran WCW and he created the NWO. And it was like the most important moment in wrestling history. And it made both wrestling organizations better and they hit their peak and all this stuff. But because Eric Bischoff made that decision, which was a great one and the most important one maybe in wrestling history, he created the storyline. But it didn't make him better going forward. It didn't mean that he was always the greatest storyline creator. It didn't mean that he was always going to make good decisions going forward. Is it fair or unfair to maybe apply that to Belichick? Just because he had this one thing that led to 20 years of greatness, it's still a small sample size decision. And it doesn't mean he's going to find the next Brady. It doesn't mean he's going to have the next dynasty. So therefore, he shouldn't have as much cachet when you look back. It's just, hey, he did a great job. It was for 20 years, but we can't expect that going forward.
Well, I think what it does is highlight how small the capacity is to move the needle of like anything else if you don't have the quarterback. And by the quarterback, I mean a guy that's going to play top 10, top 5 in any given season. Like Belichick making that move to go to Tom Brady meant that the next 15 years of his decisions, all he had to do was to land somewhere in the margins and they were going to be a contender. And if he was somewhere above the margin, they were winning championships. And if they weren't, he wasn't, right? So now if you don't have that quarterback, what you're saying is, well, all he's doing is playing around with the margin for error. He's not nothing he does is moving the needle in terms of them actually contending. So until they can find that next guy, all he's doing is, musical chairs. None of it matters until that final piece falls into place and you get the quarterback that can make everything whole again. So it's an interesting almost like referendum on the power of everything else outside of the quarterback, because Belichick could be doing a lot right or he could be doing a lot wrong, and almost nothing will make any kind of difference unless either Cam Newton, rediscovers 2015 Cam Newton, or Mac Jones is the guy that, some people thought he was.
And I already know what your next what if is. So it's a smooth transition, because I was going to say the Kansas City Chiefs. Brett Veach, they made the same decision there, right? They made the same, NFL history altering decision, which was they had a good starting quarterback and they traded up for Patrick Mahomes. And theoretically, this immediately puts them into Patriots-like territory where they're in pen in that divisional round every single year. They're in pencil in that AFC Championship.
Yeah.
And their margin of error is great. So that comes to your what if, which I see, and let's discuss, because I don't even know if it matters.
Yeah, what if this offensive line overhaul that they've just undertaken over the offseason, what if it goes to hell? They did a lot. What they've done is similar to what the Jets did a year ago, which is throw an awful lot of bodies at the offensive line. Now, they've done it in a different way, in that they pivoted away from the draft a little bit. They invested heavily in more sure things, quote unquote, in terms of trading for Orlando Brown, in terms of throwing a truckload of money at Joe Thuney. So they've taken shots at what they believe to be more sure things than drafting guys in the first round anyway. But the problem is still, like, if you're just throwing a large number of bodies at the offensive line, the chances of all of them paying off at the same time, they're just not high. Like, there is something to offensive line cohesion. Eric Eager from the PFF Forecast said that, I think it was something like, it's 1/10 of a point in the spread for week one for every offensive lineman that you don't return from the previous season, right? So just changing a body dings you 1/10 of a percent point against the spread. Like, just that's the sort of power of offensive line cohesion, is simply changing the guy is having a negative effect on your point spread. And the Chiefs are basically doing that, like, with all five, and then hoping that they pan out.
Yeah, I don't think, I mentioned before, I don't know that it matters a ton because of the baseline that they've built with Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce. I mean, I think one injury to one of those playmakers is far worse than maybe the offensive line not working. If the overhaul doesn't work, I don't think we're going to see what we saw in the Super Bowl, where you have Mike Remmers, an average right tackle, moving to the left side, and then below average starters everywhere else. So I don't think we're going to see what we saw in the Super Bowl. If the overhaul doesn't work, I still think that the Chiefs land around average as an offensive line, because, it's not real. I wouldn't compare it to the Jets, who put a ton of resources into it last year, because the Jets grabbed a whole bunch of players who were good for like 1 year, and they were hoping to build upon a lot of one-year wonders and guys who hadn't really played well in their previously in their career, like George Fant coming over from Seattle. The Chiefs did get some established players like Orlando Brown and Joe Thuney, and took a shot on Kyle Long, and they got the doctor coming back, and Austin Blythe at center, right? They have players who have played well before, whereas the Jets really we're pushing it a little bit. So I think they're good. I think they're going to be okay, but we're playing the what if game. So if the overhaul doesn't work, what does that look like in this scenario? Where do they rank? How bad are they from a pass blocking standpoint? And if you give me a baseline, I'll tell you what will happen. What if?
Well, I would say there's definitely a scenario where this Chiefs offensive line is a below average unit. I mean, Mike Remmers has had extensive periods in his NFL career where he was bad, not just average, but, a problem. So if Mike Remmers goes and is a problem at right tackle, if Orlando Brown moved to the left side and no longer cloistered by the beneficial effects of the Lamar Jackson Baltimore offense suddenly starts to struggle and his weaknesses become an issue, if Joe Thuney catches the down slope or the down end of the spectrum of what he's capable of, and if, maybe they start Creed Humphrey right away and he struggles badly as a rookie, right guard could be anything. So I would say there's like there's a scenario where they have 4 below average players and Joe Thuney playing at an above average level at left guard, which is like the least consequential position along the offensive line to have your one strong link. So let's say that this offensive line ranks 20th in the NFL and has particular problems with pass protection.
If that happens, I think the Chiefs will still be great. I think it'll come back to bite in the playoffs. So yes, if this does happen, it will matter. If they are that bad, I don't expect. I guess that's why we're playing this game, right? We don't expect these things to happen.
So at that point, they become like the Texans from 2 years ago, not last year's Texans, the one where Deshaun Watson did heroics, ran up against the Chiefs, and they blew a 24-point lead or whatever it was.
I mean, you still, I would pull out, say, like the 2011 Giants, the famous Eli Manning season that we always talk about, where Eli overcame pressure and he had a good group of playmakers to throw to, and they still ended up winning the Super Bowl, which is rare. Like, you don't have a lot of teams with a bad offensive line do that, actually overcome it. The 2015 Patriots, actually in the middle, this is Dante Scarnecchia had just retired, and their offensive line just fell apart in 2015, and it affected Brady in the AFC Championship against the Broncos. That was the year the Broncos, no fly zone, and they got after Brady, and it was we've talked about this before. Like, if you could pressure a quarterback over 40% of the time in a game, it's like this cutoff of you can't run an offense there unless you do superhuman stuff. And that's what happened at times with the Patriots that year. That's what happened with the Giants at times, unless you had that superhuman type of performance. So I think it's more pressure on Mahomes, Tyreek, and Kelsey, and some sort of third receiver to emerge so they can get the ball out of his hands quicker and protect that line.
The Giants, though, that year also had a ton of talent on the defensive line. Like that year,
right,
they had JPP, Justin Tuck, Osi Umenyiora, Matthias Kiwanuka, Chris Canty, Linval Joseph. These were all on the same defensive line. The Chiefs have Chris Jones. And
so there's
Frank Clark's about to be indicted with Uzi possession. Like
there's more.
Nobody's doing that for them.
Sometimes we speak so simplistically, which is like, hey, they have Mahomes. Speaking to myself, they have Mahomes, Tyreek, and Kelsey. Therefore, they're a 13-win team no matter what, right? And there's an element of truth in that. If the O-line overhaul doesn't work, what happens is the rest of the roster becomes highlighted, right? So to your point, if the 2011 Giants were able to overcome some issues because their defensive line was great, or because they also had Victor Cruz emerge and Hakeem Nicks, they had and Mario Manningham, so they had other position groups step up. It puts more pressure on the Chiefs. So this one stands out because they spent their whole offseason seemingly in the trenches on the offensive line, maybe neglected that third receiver, or just didn't. They just didn't get the guy. Like, they didn't get Juju Smith-Schuster. They didn't get some of the guys that they were looking at. It just puts more pressure on everybody else. Or it changes that offense, right? It becomes more of a short passing game. And I give one of the things I think has made the Chiefs so good is when teams have sat back and said, we're not going to let you take the deep ball. Patrick Mahomes has been perfectly fine playing a patient game and throwing the ball underneath. That could be their game. They might have to be a little bit more dink and dunk and less, off the cuff, chucking it down the field. Or maybe they do more of that because Mahomes is running for his life. So either way, it's going to make the offense adjust if that overhaul doesn't work and Mahomes is, hypothetically under all the more pressure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. Is what it does is highlight. It will highlight the deficiencies on this Chiefs roster, which I think are actually kind of multiple. Which is why I bring up that Texans team. Like, that Texans team was not great, but they had Deshaun Watson, and that was able to paper over a lot of cracks, ultimately until they ran into a team that was a better version of them in the Chiefs.
Remember, that was 2019, not 20, when they were a playoff team.
Right. So if the Chiefs, the Chiefs could easily become the Texans in that scenario, where they're, good, they're a playoff team, they have an amazing quarterback, but they get to the postseason and run into a team that doesn't have as many holes as they have. Like, maybe this year it's the Buffalo Bills, right? And Kansas City runs into Buffalo, who suddenly have like a much better roster top to bottom, and Mahomes on his own not on his own, but Mahomes, Kelsey, and Tyreek Hill can't overcome that.
If you like fantasy football and if you like playing fantasy for money, you need to check out Underdog Fantasy. Underdog's got everything, including season-long and playoff best ball. Best ball is a season-long game where you draft a team like you normally do, but that is it. No in-season roster management. Underdog automatically selects your best performers each week, saving you loads of time. Go to Underdog Fantasy right now. Deposit $10 using promo code PFF and get a free PFF Edge annual subscription. That's promo code PFF. Draft now at Underdog Fantasy. So that brings me to my big what if, because if there are teams to knock off the Chiefs, some of the first answers, you might see the Tennessee Titans, but you'll have the Cleveland Browns, Baltimore Ravens, your Buffalo Bills that you just mentioned. So my big what if is what if Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen, those three fourth-year quarterbacks that are expecting to break the bank. They're the next guys in line for the big payday. What if those guys have mediocre seasons, one or all? What happens then? Where does the decision go for those particular teams? The Browns re-signing Baker to a long-term deal. The Ravens re-signing Lamar Jackson. The Bills re-signing Josh Allen. This could be irrelevant because they're talking right now. There's already talk of the Lamar deal or the Allen deal, just getting it done before the season. So maybe my big what if one of these guys isn't re-signed and they don't have a great year? What does that do for their future with their respective team?
Well, that's the thing, because I don't think it becomes irrelevant. It just becomes really interesting if the deal is already done, because those quarterbacks are now, and the teams, they're now walking this fascinating line between the earlier you get the deal done, the cheaper it is for the team, but the more you expose yourself to exactly what you're talking about, which is they end up not being the guy that you thought they were, or they take a step back and you're not quite justifying the value. Like the worst case scenario is obviously what happened with Goff and Wentz, where the whole thing unspools and you acutely regret the contract you gave them, and both those guys are no longer with the team that gave them that deal. But there's also a world where they're just not living up to it, and you're saddled with this giant contract for a guy who isn't playing as well as you thought he was, which was Jared Goff last year, I guess. But to me, the only one of those quarterbacks that's actually in danger of not being re-signed, or even like it's a factor, would be Baker Mayfield. I think Josh Allen and Lamar are getting re-signed pretty much regardless of what happens. It would take like a pretty spectacular implosion for those quarterbacks not to get re-upped. The only one whose team I think can look at what they have right now and not be sure, not be 100% bought in yet, is the Browns and Baker Mayfield. And why that's really interesting is because, again, like the first guy to get signed is going to be the cheapest deal. So if you're the Browns,
he's been the most consistent of the three. He's had the best 3 years.
But the highs haven't been there, right? Compared to the other guys.
Yes. So this was like what I used to say about the class of 2016, right? And this is why ranking quarterbacks and just saying this guy's 1, this guy's 2, this guy's 3, it usually just doesn't stay that way unless you have a guy like a Mahomes. Like if you go back to the 2017 draft class, you'd say Patrick Mahomes has been the best quarterback, and then Deshaun Watson, and then way down there Mitch Trubisky, right? Like we know the 1, 2, and 3 is clear as day. But the 2016 class, remember, that was Jared Goff, that was Dak Prescott, and that was Carson Wentz. All 3 of those guys have had years where they've been the best quarterback, either by traditional stats or by PFF grade. And they used to like rotate, and they've all been first, they've all been third, they've all been second. This group, Baker was the highest graded quarterback of this trio his rookie season. But to your point, it wasn't as high as what Lamar and Allen did. Lamar and Allen were legitimate MVPs or MVP candidates. In Allen's case, he was a candidate. Lamar was the MVP. They dominated in their best seasons. Baker never had the lows maybe that Lamar had. Lamar did not grade well as a rookie, even though they won a lot of games and he added value on the ground. And Josh Allen, we've talked about it a million times, graded in the 60s for 2 years and then broke out to the 90s. So in 3 years, we've seen Baker Mayfield be the highest graded of the trio, Baker, Lamar, Allen. We've seen Lamar be the highest graded quarterback in 2019. We saw Josh Allen last year. So this is very much like that 2016 class where it's not this definitive. After year 2, it was like Carson Wentz is the star of this group. He's the guy. And it's like, wait a year. Okay, now Jared Goff is actually the highest graded quarterback, and he's taken the Rams to the Super Bowl. And then you wait 2 years. It's like, wait a second. Now, after the smoke has cleared, Dak Prescott has been the most consistent quarterback over the 5 years of that particular draft class. There's still more to learn about Baker, Lamar, and Allen. And it is crazy to me that Baker, because he hasn't had the peaks that those guys have had, but he was good as a rookie, took a step back as a sophomore, was good in his third year. In theory, he should be the safest guy, but I agree with you. He is maybe the most challenging one, and maybe because he doesn't have the trump card that Lamar has as a runner or that Allen has just as a physical freak.
But I think it's because the high end is becoming more important, right? I think teams, certainly when you're looking for that second contract and you're about to make a guy the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, I don't think safety is, I mean, it's a factor because you don't want to end up with the Jared Goff or Carson Wentz contract, but I think that's a secondary concern versus, like, can this guy actually take us to and win a Super Bowl? And right now, I think that's kind of an open question still with Baker. Like, he's been good, and he's played well enough that a juggernaut of a team, which is, arguably what he's sitting on right now, can win with him. But there's no evidence yet that he can do what a Mahomes does or what a Tom Brady did, which is, carry a team on his shoulders for a period of time and win a championship. I think you have more confidence that Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson can achieve that because of the highs we've seen, the unanimous MVP season for Lamar, the year that Josh Allen just had. So I just think the Browns are in this fascinating spot where they're weighing up, making Baker the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, albeit, for a short period of time if they get it done early, trying to get it done early because that makes the deal as cheap as it could possibly be, and yet waiting because they're not 100% certain that Baker has the ceiling that those other guys have. So I think it's a really incredibly interesting what if they don't re-sign him, because like Baker he's been the guy that stopped that jersey, right? The million names since they came back that just been going down to the floor. Baker stopped that. And he's been the first guy that's essentially stopped the overhaul and the turnover in Cleveland. And for them to look at that and say, yeah, this is nice. We're not starting this sequence of guys that have no shot, but it's not good enough, would be a hell of a statement for the Browns to make in terms of like the direction of this team.
All right, yeah, and if there's a regime, we talk about the Browns being pretty analytically sound and the Ravens being analytically sound. If there are teams that might be able to separate themselves from the emotional aspect of the jersey, right? I mean, there's an emotional aspect of the Browns jersey, 900 starters since Tim Couch in 1999. There's an aspect of, well, Baker, he's the first guy that we've actually believed in. Of course you have to re-sign him. But we always talk about this. Is he a top 8 quarterback? Is he a top 10 quarterback? Is he a guy that you can generally count on year in, year out? And we've always thrown like Matt Ryan and Phillip Rivers in that bucket. So those guys have had, from a team standpoint, below average seasons before, right? So maybe that cutoff needs to be even higher. Maybe it's just give me the top 6 or 7 quarterback, and that guy's going to give you that baseline of success, and everybody else is kind of a crapshoot year in, year out. Because we've seen guys like Derek Carr, who was not a top 8 or 10 quarterback when he's been re-signed, or Joe Flacco or Matthew Stafford. Those guys are on the outside looking in, and you're working with a lower baseline of quarterback than the best teams in the league. It's just the bottom line. And I don't think we know where Baker, Lamar, and Allen truly are yet. I think we're probably 1 year removed. Just more information, right? We're going to have one more year of information if they're truly a top 6, a top 5, a top 8 quarterback, like in that range where they're the guy. Because again, we've seen Goff, we've seen Wentz already re-signed and moved on from. And it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, there's an element of, hey, just re-sign the guy, and if you have to flip him at some point, somebody will pay for him. But you still get saddled with the contract. So it's a risky proposition if you do pay them too early. And they all are. I think they all get their deals done, but I'm with you. If any team doesn't do it, it's probably the Browns and Baker Mayfield.
Who's the most likely of the three to have a mediocre season?
I think it's Allen. Don't put me on the spot there. You have to look at the data points. I think you have to look at the data
supports that.
He's had two below average seasons and one outstanding season.
Yeah, but even the breakdown of those seasons is weird. Like that second year is the one where you can look at it in a bunch of different ways.
True. Look,
the last 2 years, if you combine the last 2 years, his PFF grade up to 20 yards, so everything short of deep passes, is top 5 in the NFL. It's like 90 plus PFF grade. It's basically just a complete and total inability to hit a deep ball in year 2 is what screws Josh Allen. Otherwise, you would look at his career and say it's been this nice, neat step-by-step progression. And even if you're not anticipating it going up another step in year 4, you would say at the very minimum, like he's arrived. Like this is where he's going to be somewhere plus or minus last year.
You said most likely, and I think it's either Allen or Baker Mayfield. I think Lamar, I keep coming back to the run game component that Lamar adds, even more than Allen, right? Allen's a great runner, but Lamar is like a part of the run game. He is a 1,000-yard rusher if they want him to be. So it's either Baker or Allen. I think that is most likely to maybe have that mediocre type of season. Baker's one year removed from actually having it. And to your point, Allen's trajectory is at least looking to be in the right area.
I think it's Lamar.
You think it's Lamar. I know. That's fine.
Lamar had a worse PFF grade last year than Baker, by the way. And this is including like a couple of absolute stinkers that Baker Mayfield had. When you think of what that team looks like now by the Browns, what they've done, like the roster that now sits behind Baker, the fact that he's having a full offseason within the same offense, a productive offense, a proven offense, Odell Beckham coming back. Like if the Browns weren't the Browns and you were just looking at this team on paper, you would be saying this is a team that can rival Tampa Bay and Kansas City. Like they're a juggernaut. They're a beast. So Baker Mayfield should have a career year this year. Should. Now it doesn't mean it will, but like he is absolutely primed to have a great year. Lamar Jackson, okay, yes, they've added Rashad Bateman, they've added Sammy Watkins, they've added some pieces to that passing game. On the other hand, there was like some serious stagnation to that offense last year.
That would be my argument in favor of Lamar Jackson, is when you look at Josh Allen and what the Bills have done to build around him. One of the worst situations in the NFL as a rookie in 2018. We always talk about they added Cole Beasley, they added John Brown, and then boom, they added Stephon Diggs. And his progression and trajectory did coincide with a better offensive line and a top 3 group of skill position players on the outside. Lamar, we always talk about, he's the system. They built the system around him. They built it around his rushing ability, which creates open throws and all that stuff. But if you look at his receiving core, it's been bottom 5, even in his MVP season, bottom 5 caliber receivers. They did have great tight ends with Mark Andrews. They had Boyle. They had Hayden Hurst in that MVP caliber season. But it's still, like a bottom 10 or 12 group of pass catchers in Baltimore. So Lamar and Baker, to your point, they've built the system. They've got a juggernaut now. The Bills, you could argue, have a juggernaut. I don't know that the Ravens have actually built the incredible supporting cast. Offensive line is fine. The running backs are fine. They have not had the outside playmakers that these other couple quarterbacks have had. And I think that's almost in favor of Lamar. He had an MVP caliber season without great receivers on the outside. And that's why I think he might be, the highest floor of the group right now.
But I'm just not sure they've done enough to put around him. And when you consider that offense, the offensive problems there, I think probably went beyond just, hey, there's no Julio Jones in this offense. The idea that offense has stagnated, that it hasn't shown, the continuous evolution that we want to see from units either on offense or defense, like it has been to an extent figured out by NFL teams. Like Lamar Jackson will always be a cheat code and a trump card and an absolute nightmare to defend, but he's less of a nightmare right now than he was when you hadn't seen him before for any extended period of time. Like defenses are better now at knowing how you want to defend Lamar Jackson. So unless that offense as a unit can show significant development this year and pose defenses more problems, like I don't see the pathway for Lamar jumping back from last year to MVP Lamar again. Whereas I see a pathway for Baker just being automatically better than he was last year.
Yeah, I get it. And look, this isn't to take away from what the Ravens have done building around Lamar. I think they've done a really good job. But again, in that one particular area, when you talk about who Lamar is throwing to, what if he did have Josh Allen's receivers or the Browns receivers? We could be seeing a different story there. Let's do one more what if each, and we'll wrap it up. What you got?
What if somebody puts together an all-time great defense? You know, we're so focused on the quarterbacks, we're so focused on offense, on what all these teams can do. But what if somebody puts together, you know, the Legion of Boom or that Denver defense that was so incredible, or just another one of these all-time great defenses where you look at it and you're saying this unit is the reason this team is in the Super Bowl. They're the reason that they are dominating every offense they come up against, and they can elevate the level of, you know, mediocre quarterback play. You know, the last vestiges of Peyton Manning won a Super Bowl when there wasn't any real discernible difference that year between Peyton Manning and Brock Osweiler at quarterback. Like, that is the power of a great defense if you really hit on it. It's such a difficult thing to do because you need to get at least like 12 to 15 guys together for you to even assemble that kind of unit.
And there's a handful of them that we can think of from the last decade, right? Like, how many of those all-time great defenses truly existed?
Right. Not many at all.
So if that does happen, you know, the times that we have seen it, you mentioned the 2015 Broncos, they go and win the Super Bowl. The 2013 Seahawks win the Super Bowl, beat Peyton and his great offense that particular year in 2013. The Super Bowl Giants weren't really that team. They just kind of got hot and rushed the passer extremely well on their couple playoff runs. Defense does matter. The act of playing good defense does matter. It's the problem is predicting it. So it's a challenge to predict who it could be. Any idea who could actually do this? Or do the Rams from last year? Like, the Rams last year were so good because all of a sudden they had the best defense in the NFL. That was unexpected. And that's why they overcame, you know, the offense that hasn't really been clicking over the last couple of years.
Obviously, they don't tend to come out of the blue, but they tend to be outliers compared with what you thought they would be. You know, even these great defenses like the Broncos and the Seahawks, like, they were good, and then they became like absurdly great for like 1 year, and then it kind of regressed or it stepped back a little bit. So it tends to be a little bit unexpected when it happens. The team that I think has a shot at it if things break their way would be Washington. Ooh. Like, that defensive front is already pretty badass. Then just the list of first round picks they have on it, almost all of whom have worked out. Like, there are teams out there, like, didn't the Falcons grab a whole bunch of first rounders and they weren't particularly good? They were getting like the
retread first rounders.
They were former first rounders, which isn't quite the same thing. But the Washington football team have actually assembled like a bunch of first rounders that are all their own and have worked well so far. But they've also added some players on the back end as well. Like William Jackson coming in has the potential to be better than anybody they had there last year. Cameron Curl was already really good. Landon Collins hasn't really played the way he had earlier in his career, but he's still pretty young. Obviously, they added the great David Mayo, so things are looking up. But like, this is a team that has the bodies. They've got the horses to be a really, really good defense.
What if it's the Denver Broncos again?
Ooh.
What if it was, you know, Von Miller's coming back, Bradley Chubb's coming back, you know, two guys who have been on and off the field the last couple of years. You've got those pass rushers that maybe people have forgotten about. Justin Simmons has been the best safety in the league over the last couple of years. Kareem Jackson has been really good. And we've talked a lot about, you know, they were the darlings of our defensive team building offseason, right? Get to 4 deep at corner. Well, they've got Kyle Fuller, Ronald Darby, the great Bryce Callahan, and then they drafted Patrick Surtain at number 9 overall. Legit 4 deep at cornerback with Vic Fangio. You know, the guy who has constructed the 2-4-6 defense, right? We're going to play too high quite a bit. We'll rotate the safeties, but we're going to keep everything in front of us and not allow big plays. The Broncos might have the elements there, but again, their success will still come back down to what happens at quarterback with Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater, but that defense can play.
Right. They're the one team where you look at it and you say, okay, even if they had that defense, they can't win. You know, Washington, like, you can, if Washington's defense ends up being one of those Seahawks, Broncos, great defenses of all time, you're like, all right, I could talk myself into Ryan Fitzpatrick winning a Super Bowl at the head of that kind of juggernaut. I don't think I can even talk myself into Teddy Bridgewater or Drew Lock doing that. Like if the Broncos defense ends up being as good as the one that won Peyton Manning his second Super Bowl, I don't think I can even talk myself into Drew Lock not screwing it up.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, Peyton did try to screw it up a little bit in the Super Bowl, but he was solid in those first couple games, if I remember, on the run. The Super Bowl wasn't great against the Panthers, but yeah, you could generally trust Peyton to just make enough good decisions. And I don't know if Drew Lock is there yet. It's also going to be tough for the Broncos to have an all-time great defense in that division. They have to play the Chiefs. They have to play the Raiders, who have been a really good offense, and then the Chargers with Justin Herbert there. So it'll be a challenge just against who they play against. But I kind of want to see them have a great defense just because of all those matchups that we talked about. People were sick of Rams Seahawks last year. I was not. I was ready for round 4. Let me see a great Rams defense go up against Russell Wilson and the Seahawks and just see if they could figure it out. And the Seahawks never really figured it out.
Peyton Manning won a Super Bowl with a stat line that looks... Remember that Super Bowl where everybody was ridiculing Big Ben for winning Super Bowl MVP against the Seahawks because it was such a joke? Peyton Manning won a Super Bowl completing 13 of 23 attempts for 141 yards with no touchdowns, 1 pick, 6.1 yards per attempt, a PFF grade of 45.
Did he have 2 turnover-worthy plays or 3? He had a couple he tried to throw away. He tried to throw the game away.
3 turnover-worthy plays. Here's my favorite stat, though. He had, you know what his average time to throw was?
Like 1.9 or something?
2.1 seconds. That dude was just trying to get rid of it as soon as humanly possible.
Save my life.
Still had a grade of 45 with 3 turnover-worthy plays.
Yeah, it was ugly for Peyton in his last game. But
that's genuinely one of the worst games Peyton Manning has ever played, and it got him a second Super Bowl ring.
And that D was incredible that season. Yeah, if they do it, so the bottom line is if somebody puts together an all-time great defense, some team is making a playoff run or in the playoffs that maybe shouldn't have been. Or if it happens to be attached to, say, the Browns or the Bucs or the Chiefs for some reason, then it's like, all right, this team might never lose because, they've got, they're good everywhere else or they're good offensively. So that's your what if. Let me wrap it up with this. What if the Steelers' offensive line is good? And we're coming out with our re-rankings. We're just pushing out the rankings once again. Little adjustments here and there. And there's 2 teams that are going to be adjusted in our offensive line rankings. One is the Jets because they signed Morgan Moses and they upgraded from a below average tackle at George Fant, upgrading to Morgan Moses above average tackle.
Great move.
The Steelers go from David DeCastro, the guy that I was going to say is like the one guy you can kind of count on as a starter at the Steelers, who's now released/retired and replacing him with Trey Turner, who's coming off a career low 32.4 grade last year. The Steelers legitimately have 5 question marks up front. But what if they all come together, Sam? What if it all works out? What if they're just geniuses in evaluating their offensive linemen? And this year, the Steelers' offensive line is good. And one of the things that we think is one of their biggest weaknesses actually becomes at least average. What can the Steelers do?
Could we just, as a slight aside, ask just what the hell happened to Trey Turner? That guy's only 28, and it feels like he's like 45 years old and just in the pits of like the worst decline in history.
His best season from 2015 was that Panthers year that they went to the Super Bowl.
And that was his second year. So he went from like pretty good as a rookie to very good in year 2 as everything on the Panthers was clicking, and then has basically steadily gone downhill since with multiple different teams now. And last year was an absolute disaster. Like, what has happened to that guy?
Is there just something about playing for the Chargers, though? He went 1 year to play with the Chargers and had a 30. He was on the decline anyway. His grade has declined in each of the last 4 years, but last year was a train wreck.
It was, and I'm sure that, like, being in the Chargers was a part of that. But as you said, it was already headed in that direction. Like, for a guy of his age, him and Gabe Jackson. Like, Gabe Jackson hasn't fallen as hard, but those guys were both at their best, like, almost immediately in the NFL. They've had like running back careers, where their best season was like rookie year and year 2. And then as soon as they reached like mid-20s, they just started a painful decline. And now you're, well, you don't want that guy starting for you, at least in Trey Turner's.
They were both like really good, young, up and like they were they were guys you expected to be top 10 caliber guards early. If you have PFF premium stats, just go check it out. Like throw their career in reverse and it makes more sense. We say that a lot about, various people like Carson Wentz sometimes, but that's what it looks like for Trey Turner. So what if he gets back though?
So left to right, the Steelers' offensive line on paper right now is Chukwuma Okorafor at left tackle.
Yep.
Kevin Dotson at left guard. Kendrick Green, let's give him the start at center because, they drafted him, so that's probably going to happen. Trey Turner at right guard, and then Zach Banner at right tackle. The only one of those guys that has any kind of positive grading in his history is Kevin Dotson last year based off 300 and something snaps, right?
And it was mostly pass blocking. He only allowed one pressure last year in his limited time. And like everybody on the Steelers offensive line, even DeCastro. I mean, DeCastro had his career low grade last year, but they were all poor from a run blocking standpoint. And Zach Banner has been solid in very limited time. He's bounced around the league a little bit. He's been solid in very limited time.
And chiefly as a sixth offensive lineman.
Correct.
They would bring him in as the jumbo tight end.
Big dude who can lean on some people in the run game. And
was supposed to start last year, but got injured and didn't. Right. And then they've basically just given him the mulligan and said, well, we thought you were going to start and be good last year, so let's assume that happened and give you a contract to do it again, which is, I mean, you pose the what if, what if they're just geniuses at evaluating? That would, that's a hell of a process, whether it works out or not, to just be well, we assumed you were going to start and be good last year, so let's just pretend it happened and give you the contract to do it again.
This does feel like the Jets of last year, where everybody that they brought in, it's it is a big what if, right? It's not like the Chiefs. Orlando Brown has had 3 really good NFL seasons. Joe Thuney has become one of the best guards in the NFL, and the Chiefs signed those guys. The Jets got a whole bunch of guys who either weren't good or were only good for a year, and you could say, well, if these 5 things happen, the Jets will be okay, and of course they didn't all happen.
Yeah, it feels like a process rooted in optimism more than realism, which is always a dangerous way to go in the NFL, particularly when you're talking about an offensive line, and even more so when you're talking about replacing an entire offensive line in an offseason.
But the optimistic view would be Okorafor, year 3-ish breakout type of guy. Zach Banner's kind of he's played longer than 3 years, but he's got the snaps of a 1-year player essentially. So you hope for the development there. Trey Turner turns back the clock to 2015. Kevin Dotson builds upon his promise. And Kendrick Green, he had the highest percentage of positively graded run blocks in the entire draft among interior offensive linemen. He could be a great run blocker. He whiffs a lot too. He's kind of like that volatile J.R. Sweezy type of guard that we always talk about internally here at PFF. And Green's trying to maybe move to center. But I could see the positive in all those guys. But again, it's just risky.
So we did this in reverse for the Chiefs offensive line, but so optimistically, all those guys work out to varying degrees. Put that together and give me where they rank. Where does this Steelers offensive line end up in an optimistic viewpoint of all these guys working out?
I think even optimistically, that brings them up to 15th. I mean, because we're talking Okorafor has started and been below average. Banner has not really started extensively. Trey Turner's 4 years removed from his best work. But even if he reverts back to a 65 grade type of guy, to me, that's the best case scenario is a few guys are in that 65 to 75 range. And if 5 guys do that, that's your offensive line 10 to 15, maybe, at best. Isn't that what that is?
I mean, I guess the what if there is that's good enough for them to achieve what they need to achieve if the other things work, right? So that if this offensive line optimistically works out, even if that isn't great, that makes the offensive line at least give you the platform for a solid enough, for Najee Harris won't be wasted because the offensive line is so bad that Najee Harris literally can't impact the offense. It's also good enough for Roethlisberger to actually change his style of play from last year, where he had, one of the lowest average depths of target in the NFL and wasn't pushing the ball deep downfield and all those kinds of things. He can do that next year. Now, it doesn't mean he will, but it means he can. You're looking.
Yes. It gives them the opportunity to allow Chase Claypool to maybe become the star that he teased last year, for Deontay Johnson to become that high volume receiver, for Juju to have another contract year, but have a big contract year, and to yeah, throw the ball down the field more. That's the biggest thing that the Steelers need to be able to do.
Right. Like Tua Tagovailoa's biggest problem as a rookie was a complete absence of like aggression and big throws down the field. Tua's average depth of target was half a yard higher than Roethlisberger's. That's how absent of big plays Roethlisberger was, right? So one thing that has to change for Pittsburgh to be a contender this year is Roethlisberger becoming more aggressive, even if it causes more turnovers and more big plays going the other way. Like they don't have a shot if he's going to try and dink and dunk this whole thing all the way to a Super Bowl. That's never going to happen. He's not good enough right now to achieve that. So he has to be more aggressive and just play the volatility game and hope you hit the high side of variance. He can't do that if the offensive line is one of the worst in the NFL, which it could be, right? That offensive line on paper is not a good unit right now. But if it hits the high side of what it's capable of and it's middle of the pack, it's good enough for him to do that. It won't always be pretty, and there'll be some problems in there. But the onus shifts back to Roethlisberger, which I think is a better thing than the onus being on the offensive line.
It gives the Steelers a chance, and I think that is, that's all you can ask for. Is if they could creep back toward average somehow. What if they can?
I mean, that would be it, right? The high side of this is the what if of if the Steelers' offensive line is better than people expect it to be, and the optimistic outlook of this group hits, what they have achieved is crept back toward average. They've thrown a lot of resources, they've changed a lot of players, and successfully crept back toward average, which, as we've been preaching for years now, is all you need to do on the offensive line, assuming the other things are capable of doing what they need to do. So that is your what if. If the Steelers' offensive line successfully creeps back toward average, now every other part of that offense that needs to be good gets a chance to try that.
And if it doesn't, if it's not good, we go into next offseason with the Steelers likely looking for another quarterback, still needing to figure out 4 or 5 starters on the offensive line, and probably needing a complete overhaul in their cornerback room because Joe Hayden's getting a little bit older. Who knows who their second cornerback is even this year. It's James Pierre and Justin Lane and Cameron Sutton as their 2/3. So they go into next offseason with huge question marks at the same valuable positions plus quarterback. So big year for the Steelers. But if the offensive line's good, it at least gives them a chance. We have Bobby Wagner coming up now. Is it Bobby Wagner time?
No, probably not.
No, the podcast is going to end within the next minute, and it's probably
Here's the thing, though. Like, when we thought Bobby Wagner was going to show up, he didn't. So maybe if we think he won't show up, that's when Bobby will be here.
Do we just have, like, the cameras recording at all times just in case he calls and we're ready to go?
Yeah, just leave the studio running?
Yes. Can we, have we tried to reschedule him at all?
Yeah, but I think the last time we left it was like Bobby can't show up until like the 27th or something. So,
all right, we got 8 more
time
days.
Period. There was a time period last time during which Bobby would definitely not be here.
I'll be ready for when Bobby's here. Anyway, you guys should be ready for the Save 40 sale, 40% off all PFF subscriptions if you are a first-time subscriber. Check it out over at pff.com. Lots of exciting stuff happening. Have we announced Cousin Doug? We've got...
I don't think he's announced it on Twitter.
Did he announce PFF officially?
Yeah.
Okay. I saw you left Nesson. I did say he needed to, another NWO reference. I did want him to rip off the Nesson shirt and maybe like spray paint PFF over it or something. But yeah, we never got I don't think he did that. But yeah, we've got a whole new group of people joining the team here. It's really exciting here at PFF.
Yeah, cool. The expansion going on at PFF is madness right now. It's crazy. We got people coming in all over the place, various divisions within the company. There are divisions within the company. Like that's how big we're getting. It's good. Yeah, there's various different departments. Remember when it was just like 5 of us rocking this whole thing together? Right. Now there's actual divisions within the company.
We were all the divisions. All
are expanding.
We used to be all the divisions. So yeah, it's exciting. So keep an eye on Doug and Ari and some of the other people that are going to be joining here from a breaking news standpoint, the news division here at PFF. We just have a lot going on. We'll have more of our PFF friends on the podcast like you had with Seth. I think that was a great discussion and one of the things we're thinking about doing for the season in a third podcast.
Right. I think we're going to be running 3 podcasts this year during the season. We'll have our preview show, our review show as usual, and then the one that's going to be a slightly different flavor will be whatever our third show is, likely a midweek show that might feature, other PFF people coming on, and like Seth, interesting conversations like that. We also need your emails and your interesting nuggets and questions and data points and stories. Somebody here dropped us a story about like another player. What was that? A Shaq Mason anecdote. We got people all over the place that have gone to school with or grown up with all these different players. We obviously had the Jason Kelce one a while ago.
There's a Chris Collinsworth anecdote that's never going to make the air as well.
Yes. The Kelce, by the way, which might now actually be pronounced Kels. Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw that. Is that just Travis saying that, or is that for him and Jason?
Well, surely if it's Travis, it has to be applicable to both, right? It can't be Travis Kelce and Jason Kelce. That doesn't make any sense.
Could be.
Anyway, this guy, what's his name? Paul Houston sent us in an email. He went to high school with Shaq Mason. And apparently this guy, obviously Shaq Mason destined for the NFL. This guy very much wasn't, from the sounds of it, and didn't really have a whole lot of interest in making it to the NFL, but was a defensive lineman. Eventually, they had some injuries or something. Starting left tackle get injured, and coach sends this dude in, and he's like, "Coach, I don't know any of the plays. I only practice defense. I don't know how to play left tackle." And Shaq Mason was like, "Just go in and try your best. It's not about knowing the plays. It's about hitting somebody in the mouth." And this dude was like, "No, I'm not going in. I don't know how to play left tackle. It's just, I'm not doing it." Apparently Shaq just shakes his head and walks off. And he was like, that's the difference between a dude destined for the NFL and me destined not for the NFL.
Just go hit somebody hard, man. That's all you got to do.
Send us emails. We like these things. We'll read them out if they're good. We will send people some free stuff in terms of PFF subscriptions if we really love them. NFL Podcast, singular, at PFF.com is how you get to us.
And the one last housekeeping item, PFF NFL Daily is coming back in 1 week. It'll be July 26th. We'll be back with the PFF NFL Daily, so be sure to subscribe to that as well. And you'll be getting us every single day for about 10 to 12 minutes talking about the hottest topics around the NFL. So PFF NFL Daily, wherever you're listening to this podcast. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll be back again Thursday for more great NFL discussion, Sam.